Let me tell you something they won't write on Instagram captions or preach in TED Talks. She walked into the cafe alone, no group chat, buzzing, no one saving her a seat. She wasn't texting anyone under the table. We often grow up believing that being surrounded by people is a sign of strength. The more friends you have, the more invitations you get, the more loved you must be, right? But what if I told you that loneliness, true, deliberate, powerful solitude, isn't a weakness at all? What if it's the opposite? What if the strongest people aren't the ones in the middle of every group photo, but the ones who learn how to walk alone without falling apart? There's this illusion we've all bought into that if someone is alone, they must be broken. That their aloneness is a reflection of failure, of rejection, of emptiness. But let me ask you this. Is a mountain weak because it stands alone? Is the ocean powerless because it stretches far and wide without needing a crowd? Of course not. And neither is she, the woman with no friends. She didn't choose isolation because she couldn't keep up. She chose it because she finally realized she didn't have to. Because sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is step away from conversations that don't feed her, from friendships that only function when she's shrinking herself. There's a quiet kind of courage in walking away from places where you're tolerated and building your own instead. The truth is, being alone exposes you. It puts a mirror in front of you. There's nowhere to hide, no one to distract you from your thoughts, your truths, your fears, your potential. And that's terrifying for some. But for others, for her, it's the beginning of something real. It's the first time she doesn't have to perform. She doesn't have to manage anyone else's comfort. She doesn't have to apologize for her intensity, her ambition, or her softness. She's just there with herself. And that's where the real work begins. You see, it's easy to find people who will stand with you when you're fun, when you're useful, when you fit neatly into their lives. But try going through something hard. Try changing. Try growing. The ones who love the version of you that benefits them, they'll leave. And she learned that. She learned it the hard way. And for a while, it hurt. Of course it did. But then something shifted. She realized that her loneliness wasn't a punishment. It was a space, a sacred one, a blank canvas where she could reintroduce herself to the one person she had ignored the longest, herself, without the noise, without the pressure, without the expectation to smile when she didn't want to laugh when it wasn't funny, to stay when she was ready to go. She finally got to ask herself, what do I actually want? Who am I without the background voices? And what she found wasn't emptiness, it was depth. It was clarity. It was peace. We often confuse loud with strong, but there's a kind of strength in quiet that doesn't need to prove itself. A kind of strength that doesn't crumble when no one's clapping. What's her strength? She doesn't need a circle to validate her. Her validation comes from within. And that doesn't make her cold. It makes her solid. So next time you see a woman alone, not lonely, but alone, don't feel sorry for her. Don't assume she's lost or lacking. Maybe, just maybe, she's doing what most are too scared to do. She's facing herself. She's building something from the inside out, something unshakable. And that's not weakness, that's power. We live in a world where connection is everywhere, on our screens, in our pockets, buzzing in our hands. We're more connected than ever before. And yet more people feel alone than at any point in history. Isn't that strange? It's because we've mistaken quantity for quality. We've built a culture that celebrates how many followers you have, how many group chats you're in, how many people liked your story, but none of it means you're truly seen. None of it means you're truly known. And that myth that more connection equals more value has left too many people chasing presence instead of purpose. She used to believe in that myth too. The woman with no friends. She wasn't always that way. She used to bend herself just to be included. She'd show up to every gathering, even when she felt drained. She'd keep conversations going just to avoid the silence. She thought if she stayed connected, if she kept showing up, then she would matter. But all that connection never made her feel full. It made her tired. It made her fake smiles. It made her hide parts of herself to keep the peace. And one day, she asked herself a question most people avoid. Why am I trying so hard to be surrounded by people who don't even truly know me? That was the beginning of her freedom. We're told that a full calendar is a sign of a full life, that the more people you can text, the more alive you must be. But the truth is, constant connection doesn't mean constant care. It doesn't mean closeness. She had people to call, but no one she could really talk to. She had places to go, but nowhere she truly felt at home. That's when she realized it's not about how many people are around you. It's about whether you can be yourself when they are. So she started disconnecting, one conversation at a time, one shallow friendship at a time, not out of hate, not out of bitterness, but out of honesty. Because being surrounded but unseen is lonelier than being alone, because pretending to be okay so you can fit into a group is more exhausting than solitude. And because being connected to everyone but yourself is the worst kind of disconnection there is. Now, people didn't understand. They called her distant, cold. Said she changed. Of course she did. That's what happens when you stop settling. That's what happens when you stop needing to be needed, when you no longer seek approval in empty conversations and performative friendships. When you realize that real connection isn't loud, it's deep, it's rare, it's quiet. It's the kind that doesn't need to be shown off or counted. It just is. The myth of constant connection told her that more people equals more love, but now she knows real love often walks in silence. It's not always in the party. It's not always in the feed. Sometimes it's in choosing yourself when no one claps. Sometimes it's in going home early instead of staying for the show. Sometimes it's in deleting the numbers you only text out of boredom and learning to sit with your own company instead. She found peace in the pause, in the gaps between calls, in the empty spaces that used to scare her, because those weren't empty at all. They were waiting for her to show up, not as someone who had to prove her worth, but as someone who had nothing to prove anymore. And maybe that's the truth we're all running from. That constant connection is often just a distraction, a noise, a shield. But the woman with no friends, she stopped running. She stopped reaching. And in the silence where the noise used to be, she found something better than connection. She found herself. Silence is uncomfortable, isn't it? It makes people fidget, look at their phones, fill the air with noise just to escape it, but not her. The woman with no friends, she made peace with the silence, and more than that, she turned it into something powerful, because while the world was busy talking, posting, gathering, proving, she was becoming. Silence, for most people, feels like absence, like a void, like something's missing. But for her, silence was presence, the loudest kind of presence. It was the space where her thoughts stopped competing with everyone else's, where the opinions, expectations, and judgments of the world no longer echoed so loudly in her ears. It was in the silence that she finally heard her own voice, clear, honest, unfiltered. And for the first time, she didn't push it away. She listened. You see, people think greatness is built in the spotlight, in the applause, in the constant movement and momentum. But that's not where it begins. Giants are not built in noise. Giants are built in the quiet, in the stillness, when no one is watching and there's no one to impress. That's where the foundations are laid. That's where real power is born. She had friends once. She had people around her. But the conversation stayed on the surface. No one asked about her dreams, her fears, her truths. No one really saw her. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't listen. They were too busy talking, too busy filling the air with words. And so she left, not with bitterness, but with a deep craving for something real. In the silence that followed, everything changed. At first it was hard. The quiet felt sharp, like it was cutting through her comfort zone. But then it started to soften, to stretch, to hold her. She stopped reaching for noise and started reaching inward. She read more, she wrote more. She walked without music, without distraction. And in those quiet moments, she began building something that noise never gave her: clarity. She saw who she had been pretending to be just to fit in. She saw the dreams she had put on hold because they didn't match the script. She saw how much of herself had been edited down for the comfort of others, and she decided, no more. The woman with no friends didn't disappear. She expanded. In that silence, she created. She healed. She dreamed without limits. She planned without permission. While the world scrolled and scrolled, she sat with her soul. While others chased approval, she chased alignment. And step by step, moment by moment, she turned her solitude into strength. It's easy to underestimate someone who's quiet. It's easy to mistake stillness for stagnation. But what you don't see in the silence is the storm brewing beneath it, the masterpiece taking shape, the ideas forming like constellations in her mind. That's what she was doing while no one was looking. That's what silence gave her. Because silence doesn't shrink you, it reveals you. It strips away the noise, the clutter, the fake smiles and shallow talk. And what's left is raw, honest power, the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself to anyone, the kind that grows from within, not from attention, not from validation, the kind of power that lasts. So yes, she's quiet. She walks alone. She doesn't fill every moment with chatter or keep people close just to avoid being alone. But make no mistake, she's not fading. She's not lost. She's building. And giants don't roar while they grow. They rise in silence. They rise slowly, steadily, unshakably. And when they arrive, no one sees it coming because all the noise distracted everyone else. But she was busy becoming unstoppable. There's something we don't talk about enough, something hidden underneath polite conversations and modern slogans of equality and empowerment. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it's everywhere. Society doesn't view solitude the same way when it comes to women. A man alone is mysterious, focused, driven. He's building something, they say. He's deep. He's ambitious. He's on a mission. But a woman alone, she must be sad, damaged, unwanted, cold. Why is she by herself? What's wrong with her? This is the unspoken bias, the silent judgment that wraps around a woman who decides not to belong just for the sake of belonging. The woman with no friends isn't seen as someone making a choice. She's seen as someone who failed to be chosen. Because somewhere along the way we were taught that a woman's worth is still quietly measured by how well she's liked, how many people she can hold close, how many circles she can fit into. But she doesn't, not anymore. She stopped trying. She stopped measuring her value by how many birthday invites she gets or how many people ask her how she's doing. She realized that society rewards women for being agreeable, for being accessible, for being emotionally available at all times. But when a woman pulls back, when she decides to protect her energy, when she becomes selective with her time, suddenly she's labeled, they say she's distant, that she thinks she's better than everyone, that she must have trust issues. But what if it's not that at all? What if she's just tired of pouring herself out into places that only drink her dry? What if she stopped trying to be palatable and started being honest? People don't like that, not because she's doing something wrong, but because she's breaking a silent rule. The rule that says women must be nurturing, social, open, friendly. The rule that says being alone isn't just strange, it's unfeminine. But she's writing that rule because she knows that solitude doesn't make her less of a woman. It makes her more of one, more self-aware, more in control, more tuned into her own rhythm instead of the world's noise. She doesn't need to explain herself to make people comfortable. She doesn't need to soften her sharp edges just to be accepted. She's done performing. Still, the world looks at her sideways. People whisper she's always alone. And she hears it. She feels the judgment. But she also knows the truth. She's not lonely. She's just free. Free from pretending. Free from the pressure to maintain relationships that don't nourish her. Free from the need to prove that she belongs. There's a kind of elegance in that, a kind of quiet rebellion. And it shakes people, because if a woman doesn't need constant companionship to feel whole, what does that say about the rest of us? About the systems we've built, about the roles we've accepted? She's not trying to be anyone's lesson, but just by being herself, she becomes one. She reminds people that solitude can be sacred, that a woman who chooses herself over popularity, over comfort, over approval is a powerful thing, even if the world doesn't know what to do with her. So yes, she has no friends, not because she couldn't make them, but because she stopped chasing people who made her feel small. She stopped folding herself to fit in, and in doing that, she became something most people never become, unshakably self-defined. Society may not understand her, but it doesn't have to. She's not living for their comfort. She's living for her truth. And that truth is simple. Being alone doesn't make her broken. It makes her whole in a way the world still hasn't learned how to honor. They always say she's lonely. They whisper it like it's a flaw, like it's something to be fixed, like her being alone could only ever come from pain or rejection. But they never stop to ask the right question. They never ask, what if she chose this? What if she isn't a woman rejected by the world, but a woman who rejected the world that was never real with her to begin with? That's the part they miss. The woman with no friends isn't broken. She's not some tragic figure sitting in silence, wishing someone would reach out. No, she's someone who reached the edge of pretending, looked at the life she was living, and finally said, enough. She didn't choose loneliness. She chose herself. For years she gave. She poured into others. She made herself small so they could feel big. She laughed at jokes that didn't land, stayed in rooms where her soul was suffocating, and kept conversations alive just to avoid confrontation. She gave pieces of herself to people who never once looked her in the eyes and asked, "How are you really?" And still, she stayed because that's what she thought being kind meant. That's what she thought love looked like: tolerating, giving, shrinking. But one day, the silence she used to fear started to feel like peace. One day, sitting alone didn't feel like punishment. It felt like clarity. And slowly, the noise of empty connections became louder than the fear of solitude. That's when she made the choice, not because she didn't want people, not because she hated the world, but because she finally understood the most important relationship she would ever have, the one with herself, was falling apart. And she couldn't keep betraying that for a seat at tables where she was never fully welcome. So she left, one conversation at a time, one unanswered message at a time. She stopped showing up where her heart wasn't safe. She stopped over-explaining her boundaries. She stopped apologizing for her depth. And yes, people noticed. They called her distant, cold, guarded. But what they didn't see was that she was, for the first time in her life, standing up for herself without a single ounce of guilt. Choosing herself meant sitting through long, quiet nights. It meant facing the voices in her own head, the ones she'd drowned out with distractions. It meant healing wounds she didn't even know she was carrying. And yes, it was hard, but it was worth it, because what she found in that solitude wasn't loneliness, it was truth. She found out she didn't need constant validation to feel valuable. She didn't need 5 different people to tell her who she was or how she should show up in the world. She started asking herself those questions. And slowly, she stopped being the girl who was afraid of being alone and became the woman who knew her own company was sacred. Now, the world looks at her and sees a woman with no friends, but what they don't see is the strength it took to walk away, the self-love it took to choose quality over quantity, the courage it took to face the mirror and not flinch. They don't see how full her life has become, even in the quiet. They don't see how loud her spirit is now, that she's no longer silencing it to be accepted. She didn't choose loneliness. She chose authenticity. She chose healing. She chose peace. She chose freedom. She chose herself. And if the price of that is being misunderstood, so be it. She's not living for their understanding anymore. She's living for the woman she's becoming. Strength. We think we know what it looks like. We're taught from the time we're young that strength means loud voices, busy schedules, always being on, always being surrounded, always being seen. We praise the ones who keep showing up, even when they're breaking inside. We admire the ones who hold it together for everyone else. We call that power. We call that resilience. But what if we've been wrong all along? The woman with no friends, she's not weak. She's not hiding. She's not collapsing under the weight of solitude. She is strong, but not in the way the world is used to recognizing, not in the scripted, polished, performative way. Her strength is quieter. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't parade itself around. It exists steady and unshakable, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. Because real strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's walking away when everything in you wants to stay. Sometimes it's choosing to rebuild yourself without applause. Sometimes it's being honest about what drains you and walking straight into the discomfort of change. That kind of strength isn't pretty. It's not always Instagrammable, but it's real. She knows what it's like to feel the pressure of being the strong one. She knows what it's like to carry everyone else's emotions, to hold space for others, to be the one who checks in, who shows up, who gives and gives until there's nothing left. And she knows how easy it is to lose yourself in that role, to forget that strength is not just in holding others, it's also in choosing to hold yourself first. When she started stepping back, people noticed. They thought she was giving up, that she was falling apart, but they didn't understand. She wasn't falling. She was finally rising quietly, firmly, away from everything that made her question her worth, away from people who only loved the version of her that was convenient, away from a world that teaches women to carry more than their share and call it grace. She redefined strength on her own terms. She let go of needing to explain every decision. She stopped trying to make people comfortable with her growth. She stopped shrinking to maintain peace. Her strength became boundary. Her strength became rest. Her strength became saying no without guilt and yes without fear. And in that stillness, she found something fierce, not hard, not bitter, but untouchable. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she finally learned how to protect her heart. Not because she doesn't want love, but because she refuses to settle for anything less than what sees her fully. There's a certain power that comes from walking through the fire alone and coming out without the need to prove anything. There's a strength in being okay with being misunderstood, in being your own safety, your own cheerleader, your own sanctuary. That's the kind of strength she carries now. Not the kind that breaks her down just to lift everyone else up, but the kind that lets her rise even if she rises alone. People may still call her the woman with no friends, but she no longer flinches at that label because she knows what it cost her to be strong in silence. She knows what she gained in choosing herself over constant compromise. She knows how far she's come without needing a crowd to validate the journey. She is rewriting what strength means, not with noise, not with declarations, but with choices every single day. And that kind of strength, that's the kind the world can't take from her.